themed Renewing the Mandela Legacy and Promoting Active Citizenship in a Changing World. Well, for more information on the event, I'm joined now on the line by one of the Nelson Mandela Foundation Board of Trustee members, Nikiwe Bikitsha, veteran journalist. Nikiwe, good evening to you. And I suppose the first one, we know that you're at that rehearsal at this moment as, of course, a representative of the foundation. The first naughty or cheeky question is, has the eagle landed?
Good evening to you, Bongani. I mean, you and I have been journalists for a number of years. We know we can't reveal that information until it has been confirmed.
All right, but
I can confirm that President Obama will, in fact, be arriving in South Africa this evening. We know he arrived on the continent in Kenya yesterday and has been involved in a number of events since then. But we, as the Nelson Mandela Foundation, can't wait to host him for the 16th Nelson Mandela annual lecture tomorrow.
I mean, I suppose, Nikiwe, you'll also know that with the narrative somewhat changing about Mandela's legacy, it's a challenge in particular that I think President Barack Obama will relate to as people look back on his term at the White House.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Bongani, because I think we have been having debates, and in fact we welcome these dialogue and debates because it's one of the cornerstones of what we do as the Nelson Mandela Foundation, is to steer topics around difficult conversations that we need to have, whether it's around issues around race and identity, poverty and inequality, and indeed the contested legacy of our own founder, Nelson Mandela. Now, he was the first person who would have told you, Bongani, that he was no saint. And that he wanted whatever he did to be debated, and he accepted criticism because he thought it was crucial to the growth of democracy and the kind of society that we wanted to have. And now we know that President Obama has, by and large, modeled some of his leadership based on that of Nelson Mandela. So interesting to hear in how he's going to integrate some of those elements into his own message tomorrow, which is going to deliver not just to South Africans, but globally as well.
Well, of course, the two of them being the first black presidents of their respective nations. Of course, we've seen a lot change since Barack Obama left office in the US. And when we come to South Africa, what is it, do you think, about Nelson Mandela's legacy that has opened itself up to so much contestation, as you describe it? Because not only would he have said he wasn't a saint, he would also have been at pains to point out that any decision he took was part of a collective.
Certainly, and I think none of us can run away from that. We need to always be mindful that Nelson Mandela led not as an individual, but as part of a collective that was the ANC. And I think what we're seeing most recently in terms of that contestation have been issues around economic transformation. I think what we're seeing in South Africa is that whilst we had the transition to democracy in 1994, there is a great sense that a lot of the inequality remains persistent, it is structural, and with the economic situation in decline, a lot of people are beginning to ask crucial and important questions about how it is we begin to redress that in ways which are, I suppose, substantial and also long-term, so that all South Africans feel a part of this South Africa that we claimed as new when we claimed our freedom in 1994. So a lot of those debates have been centered around that. But as you rightly say, Bongani, President Mandela was working through a very difficult and complex situation along with his leaders. But I think it was very, very important at the time that we arrive at this political solution that South Africa did, and by and large, peacefully, and we have the country that we have.
I have to ask you this. You could almost say that South Africans are often guilty of what might be termed public schizophrenia because, of course, there is this revision of the legacy. And at the same time, as I mentioned in my intro, 14,000 people will be at the Wanderers Stadium. There's huge excitement. You know, the A-listers, the who's who will be there. People are expecting to obviously hear from Barack Obama. Are we also expecting high-profile names to be in attendance?
One of the crucial things about the annual lecture, which is now in its 16th year, is that it lies squarely in what we like to do, which is to spark dialogue and debate. So we invite speakers from across the globe to share their own personal experiences from their own leadership experiences, which speak to the challenges which our founder, Nelson Mandela, cared most deeply about. And those are poverty, Bongani, inequality, injustice. So every time we invite a speaker, we want someone who's going to evoke that in them and lead us and challenge us to find lasting solutions. As we know, one of the lines that we're using is that be the legacy, because we want to encourage all South Africans to be the legacy. As Utata said, Bongani, that it is in our hands. And we know that President Obama himself has almost inculcated that into his own leadership and the work that he's doing with young people. So we're hoping that he's going to reinvigorate us into living the values of Nelson Mandela.
So, Nikiwe, a final question to you. You're at that rehearsal tonight, making sure, I suppose, that the final touches are in place. How are you feeling? How excited must you be at this hour?
I'm exceedingly excited, but also a little drained. Particularly with an event of this magnitude, there is so much to bed down, and we know that if all systems go at Wanderers Stadium, where the actual lecture will be taking place, and at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, Bongani, of course, we know that SABC, thankfully, will be partnering with us in broadcasting that event. And then later on, the chairman of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Professor Njabulo Ndebele, will be hosting some dignitaries for the centenary gala dinner, where we will be paying tribute to our speaker, President Obama, who has agreed to be our 16th annual lecture speaker, and of course, but also to mark the centenary on the eve of Dada's birthday, which of course we know is on the 18th of July. And most importantly, Bongani, we do want people to go out, as we do every year, to serve on that day in keeping with the values that Dada Mandela espoused and encouraged all of us to live by.
I'd ask you for a spare ticket, Nikiwe, but I'll be working, unfortunately. So there we will leave it with Nikiwe Bikitsha, a veteran journalist and also, of course, a board member of the trustees of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. On the line there from Johannesburg.